Welcome. You're listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is Kristin Fontana, and I'm your host. I'm here with Simon Vorster, and we're discussing Saturn in Pisces, or the 12th house. We have made it all the way around the zodiac, looking at Saturn through the houses and signs. We started January of 2019, and we took a couple months off before finishing. I think that's because we weren't wanting to finish this series. We had some resistance, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, here we are in February of 2020 and discussing Saturn and Pisces, or the 12th house, the final sign and house of the zodiac. So I'd like to welcome you back, Simon. And if there's anything you'd like to announce to the listeners, please do that.
Firstly, thank you so much, Kristin. I appreciate that. And yes, you're 100% right. I definitely felt like we didn't want to have the series end, go on for infinity, as the Pisces archetype would say. Yes, I would love to share some inspiration that has moved through me recently. I have created something called an Astrology Immersion. And this is a 12-week experience where, and it will start on March, the first week in March. And what this is I'm going to send out a video for 12 weeks. So we get 12 videos, and each video or each week, each video will specifically focus on an archetype. And we're going to go around the whole entire zodiac. And the purpose of this immersion is to literally exercise what it feels like to incarnate Aries into your body. So let me give an example of what I mean. So the first video will talk a little bit about what Aries means, and we'll learn about that. And then we're going to invoke Aries into our lives. So we're going to say, we know that Aries is about something that's new, that's a new beginning. And so the exercise for you is to go out into the world and try something you've never tried before, and to pay attention to what it feels like in your body to do something completely new. So that then you pay attention to how you interact with your environment, you pay attention to what types of insecurities arise in you. And through this methodology, you get to emotionally connect with the archetype itself, so that when you're reading it in your chart, and you're understanding your astrology and other forms of astrology, if you want to do readings for other people, you can actually sense and feel what that might be like for that person. So, and for yourself, of course. So this is about embodying astrology. So if anybody is interested in this experience, it's a 12-week immersion. Each week will focus on an archetype. And at the end of the month, we'll have a live Zoom meeting where everybody can join, discuss their experiences, ask questions to me. And I'm also going to create a private Facebook page for additional processing there as well. So this is something that I'm super excited about. I can't wait for it to start. And I'm really excited to take astrology from the head and bring it into the body, so that we can actually see the potential of this material. So I hope that's not too much information there, but that's what I want to do. And you can find all the information on my website, which is www.raisingvibrations or raising-vibrations.com. And we'll show the links or the website at the end of this call. So yeah, thanks very much, Kristin. I appreciate that.
Sure. All right. Well, we're going to just give you a little summary again of Saturn and the significance of Saturn in your birth chart. And then we will get specific with the archetype of Pisces. If you have Saturn in Pisces or Saturn in the 12th house. I know when I was born in 65, and for 2.5 years, kind of 65, 66, all those souls for sure were having Saturn in Pisces, but maybe in a different house, obviously in a different house around the zodiac, depending on the time of your birth. And every 28 or 29 years, that would return into the sign of Pisces. So, but today, we will give you some chart examples a little bit further on. I just like to remind people a bit, Simon, before we dive in fully, dive into that Pisces element, that watery, eternal, infinite energy. What it is that we look at when we're discussing Saturn and what it is that we're trying to understand and define about the archetype. And as I've said in prior webinars, this is something that just changed everything when I started looking deeper into this archetype, because every planet has a purpose. Yes, we look at Pluto and the nodes at that paradigm to understand the journey of the soul, but all the planets have a purpose, and it's a little bit like a bunch of instruments, you know, in an orchestra. Every instrument has a part, and when synthesized, it creates a story, a sound. A symphony creates a performance of sorts, you know, called your journey, called your life, and all of these different parts and instruments and planets in our life will reflect our journey, will reflect what we're calling in, whether it sounds good, feels good, or it's a tough spot or tough space. And Saturn does reflect, really, it's the structural nature of how you're putting this life together. It is the wrapping to your story, in a sense. And when we think about it literally, it becomes the skin and the bones that hold everything together in your body, starting with your soul. Your soul is that energy, that immutable energy that is timeless, that you've traveled with. It's you, it's your essence. And your bones and your skin in this life are holding the soul in place, intact, creating this feeling of separateness from the source that created you. That's Saturn, those boundaries, those fine lines, the container that houses the soul. And where Saturn is in your chart reflects also how the skin and the bones, what the energy that they are utilizing to support your soul. And in this case today, Pisces, or the 12th house, would condition, Saturn will condition through the sign of Pisces all the other planets in your chart. It's the only planet that really carries this kind of magnetism and magnitude. It is literally infusing all of the other planets with whatever house and sign your Saturn is sitting in. It's so important in this respect. And honestly, it really wasn't until I uncovered my Saturn placement that everything started to make sense to me. Because of course we look at our sun sign, our rising sign, our moon, and this is all important. Of course, our Pluto placement, the nodes. But Saturn is literally conditioning every other planet. It is so much about how it feels to be in your body and to have this emotional, container. And so just to remind you of its significance, I wanted to just say again that it's not just an individual planet. Its impact is permeating everything else in your chart. So I'll let you take it from here, Simon. You don't want to kind of, spend too much time on this. We've talked about it on all the other webinars, but I can't say enough about the significance of how it plays out and is reflected in our journey.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think that when it comes to understanding Saturn in the birth charts, those valuable points that you put out are critical. Saturn, is also the part of ourselves where it has a lot to do with the relationship to fear. And where Saturn sits in our charts, if you had to look at the structure of the chart and the intention of the soul, Saturn also will reflect to us the type of psychological and emotional need to mature. And where maturity and the need for looking at our personal limitations and where we need to restructure and structure and stabilize our sense of boundaries are very much about what Saturn speaks to. So to tie in the fear dynamic over here is that we'll have a lot of experiences with Saturn in our chart where there isn't going to be any lofty Pisces supportive energy to help us grow and mature. Saturn's going to be very clear and say, look, this is a point where you're limited. If you wish to want to grow past this experience, you might need to investigate ways or develop some skills or tools, and you have to put in the time. You have to put in the time to practice it consistently. And Saturn will reward you through being able to not only feel empowered in your ability to hold your own boundaries and strength in that area of your chart, but it will also teach you a very valuable lesson that clearly the soul has wanted you to come and experience with placing Saturn there. So wherever it sits in your chart, there is a huge potential to grow into a very stable, strong, and also at the same time, very confident way of presenting yourself to life. All right, it's a part of really coming into something that's strong, and you get rewarded, because what tends to happen with Saturn is life, sort of like with the story of the three pigs, and the bad wolf, the pig that actually took time to build a house that was made out of solid material. When the wolf came to blow it down, the wolf in this case is life, the structures were able to not only hold all the elements of life's challenges, but actually sustain life itself. And there's something really beautiful about the context of Saturn as an experience of sustainability and surety and stability, and that comes through growth. So to continue and add to what you're talking about here, Kristin, that placement of Saturn really, really supports anchoring of your emotional well-being, so that the rest of the dynamics that are emanating from Pluto can actually have the potential to grow through and hold, the experiences that are coming through us. So this is a beautiful kind of Saturn in Pisces, or Pisces expression that's coming through me, very deep in that sense. But yeah, that would be my relationship to Saturn as I contribute to the overall archetype throughout this 12 series that we've done.
All right, sounds good. I mean, I want just right out of the gates too, thinking about Saturn and Pisces, or the 12th house. The soul is going to be drawn to the spiritual realm, right? They might have a real fear around what happens when we die, but there will be a draw and a desire to learn more about it, and for it to be a big part of that soul's journey, whether it's in the form of a consensus expression in terms of religion, as the soul evolves, a more metaphysical or spiritual focus. And I'm going to give you an example of that later, how you can even see it in a younger child early on, how it plays out without much influence. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So let's just jump in and talk about what it means to have Saturn in Pisces, or the 12th house. And I'll let you take it from here, and I'll jump in as we go.
Right. So Saturn in Pisces, I would say that immediately what comes to mind is boundaries. The two archetypes themselves are they're in opposites. Saturn loves to, right? It loves to establish boundary. It loves to define. It loves to make things concrete. It's weighing, it's anchoring. And Neptune is the feeling of on a boat that you are, just floating, aimlessly, with no intention, with no direction, on a lake that's just beautiful. It's mystical. You're taking it all through your senses. You're just overwhelmed by just nature itself, and it's just being. So when you got Saturn in Pisces, I'm thinking about one person I know in particular that has had to, throughout their life, come into understanding how much of how important boundaries are to them, because the essence of Pisces is covering or coloring the Saturn archetype. And so what generally tends to show up with souls that have got the symbolism is, in their early environments, authority figures had a couple of things: that they were very addicted to anything. So they were very, they probably had a tremendous amount of pain. Authority figures had a lot of pain that they carried. This is a Pisces theme. And so to cover up that pain, or to not maybe know how to deal with that pain, there was a lot of disassociation. It can come in forms of alcoholism, Pisces. It can come through experiences of a parent potentially that was really emotionally bipolar in some sense, wasn't capable of holding stability. And so there was just two extremes within the context of emotional highs and lows. Parents that really struggled to, or the child really grew up in an environment where the boundaries and definitions weren't very clear. And so their sense of certainty around how they could establish their own reality, etc., that was not necessarily available. So that was lacking. That's where the fear would show up. They would potentially, as an adult, come into a relationship where there would be extreme codependency, and they would not know why that would be the case. That's another example. So what comes to mind straight away is how the soul is in this lifetime, trying to make sense of how establishing and anchoring a strong sense of self with an energy archetype that is actually simultaneously providing them with an environment, or the soul providing with environments in which the boundaries and definitions seem to be dissolving at the same time. So you'll generally tend to find this with souls that have got a lot of balsamic energy in their chart, or that there's a main focus on culmination in the chart. I noticed that if a soul's got skip steps and they are in a situation, or a situation where they are in that cycle, Saturn in Pisces is reflecting the necessary psychological and emotional structure, like you said, where their relationship to life, it has to be filtered through this Pisces archetype, culmination. What's the higher meaning in the experiences? What am I trying to culminate here? But what that really looks like in reality is my relationship to surrender, in that sense, because that's ultimately what balsamic energy is really putting through, is surrendering to experiences that are in a culminative state, in a closing state. So that's what I really observed with this type of energy. And of course, with the later examples that I gave, that would be something where an evolutionary astrologer would be able to, say, okay, look, this looks like this over here, that looks like that there, that's culminating, and so on. Whereas in the earlier examples I was giving with the general Saturn in Pisces themes that I've seen in regards to boundaries and establishing boundaries, or definition, you'll notice that there are themes like Moon conjunct Neptune, Moon opposed Neptune, Neptune in the 10th house. The soul is again coming into a state of really crucifying the previous structure of reality, culminating a relationship dynamic towards the parents. It could be a healing dynamic relationship towards the parents. The soul might be in an experience that I've noticed where they're actually trying to come out of many lifetimes where alienation and isolation have been deeply predominant in their chart. So, there are many, many different ways that this Saturn in Pisces theme shows up as soul stories can present themselves, but those have been sort of the range that I've noticed and observed. One thing I would say, though, and maybe this is something that we can kind of saved in terms of a different context of the conversation, and that is that Saturn Pisces souls, from what I've observed, need to recognize that they are going to be a lot more sensitive to their environment, and they're going to have parents that are very sensitive. They're going to have parents that are potentially spiritually inclined. And so their relationship to spirit, Pisces, Neptune, higher meaning, is also cultivated there. And that's the other side to the stories, the positive things, or the experiences that I've seen where there's a lot of the soul might actually be growing up in an environment in which the context of spirituality is something that is there, and so that is leading them to either find their own path, own authority, and what that means for them, or to be turned into that world where that is something that they're exploring in that sense, and they're opening up to in that way as well. So those are my thoughts.
Right. I mean, also somebody could have Saturn in the 12th house and not be part of that Saturn in Pisces generation and experience all of those things. You know, people
Exactly.
born, souls born 1994, 95, 96, somewhere in that range are also Saturn in Pisces. But again, you, depending on the time of day that you're born, you could have Saturn in that 12th house. You know, it also connects to a high degree of sensitivity to the environment, to the collective. You know, there's so much you can take in as a soul that's not your own. You could be feeling the collective angst and feeling as if it's your own reality, but as you learn, it's about learning what's yours and what's not, and learning how to live with that, essentially, because there's nothing a Saturn and Pisces soul can do to change their sensitivity to the environment, except for to get strong in their own ways and emotionally,
Exactly.
to know what they can do to support themselves, to nurture themselves, to create a stronger support for themselves, because it's a little bit like having an open aura or an open energy field where you're able to osmose so much more. It's like learning in biology. Remember when we learned about the semi-permeable membrane or the permeable membrane, where
Yeah.
just everything is just coming in. And everybody that I talk to that has a strong water chart, in particular strong 12th house Pisces planets, like you mentioned, a Neptune moon conjunction, something of that nature, it's exactly their reality. And it becomes overwhelming at times as well, because you're having to separate yourself from what's yours and what's not. The other thing that can occur is that these souls with Saturn in the 12th or Saturn in Pisces could have a more sensitive immune system. So you're going to have to really become educated in how to support your immune system in a way that, you know, with everything that's going on in the planet along these lines, just to stay strong, to defend yourself against, you know, things that are floating around in the atmosphere. And so, again, easier for these souls to pick up on, or, you know, different illnesses, etc., because of their inability to defend against it. I've talked to clients, a lot of clients too, who are immunosuppressed. Is that the way you say it? Or have a lot of
Yeah.
immune system conditions
Exactly.
that have plagued them in their life. And not everybody who has Saturn and Pisces is going to experience this. Again, it has to do with the whole chart. But like your Epstein-Barr, or you know, anything going on even in the gut, right?
Mhm.
Irritable bowel, all of our health is a reflection of what's going on in our gut. And the gut, the lining of the gut does connect to uh, the lining of anything is Saturn, is Capricorn, it's containing that. And so the health of the gut can dictate the health of the person. So these are all things that, you know, probiotics and things like that, keeping the body healthy in that way is really critical. Because again, it's just a hypersensitivity to the environment, and you're going to take in stuff that you don't want to. The blessing is you will take in stuff that you do want to. It creates a consciousness that is more open, more sensitive to ethereal experiences, to um, the other side, for example. And so you're very open to energy in a way, even though it's Saturn, again, it's conditioning every other planet. So you're more sensitive and open to the energy of this world in a way that can allow you to become, you know, a healer of sorts, you know, really being able to just this quality of, or this compassion, this empathy for others allows you to really understand how someone in need might feel, and then able to give them what they need because you're able to feel what they feel. So there's that also going on. And again, it just depends on the stage of evolution for anybody, and it just just depends on everything else going on in the chart. But that is
Right.
a wonderful foundation for being able to help others in a very in a spiritual way, in a healing way, and starting with being able to feel what they're feeling, having a sense of knowing what they need in that kind of context.
Yeah, so I wanted to
Oh, go
talk
ahead.
about a couple of things that you had mentioned. So feeling, again, this is, what I've observed. It's primary for these souls. Their sensitivity to the environment it's a lot, and for them to be able to translate that information, that experience, into something that makes sense to them at a very early age can be very difficult, I think. And that's why there are two ways that this can go out. It can be in an environment where the child and young adult is in an environment where there's a lot of empathy, people can process their feelings, or at least have them available, and that helps the soul really make sense of their reality. And that's a profound thing, because these people have the capacity to understand empathy like no other. Not saying that you can't have empathy with Saturn in Scorpio or Saturn in Capricorn, but just that this is more heightened.
Exactly. That's a perfect word for Pisces on that level.
Exactly. And you also mentioned about these souls, having sensitivity to their immune system. I mean, absolutely. Pisces, we know, speaks to the immune system. And this has a lot to do with the context of boundaries, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very important, like, what is a boundary in the context of this conversation? And what I mean by that is the capacity to know where you begin and somebody else
Exactly.
there. And that Pisces fluidness, is not necessarily natural in that state. It's just one with everything. So within the context of being one with anything and everything, that dissolving where your personal sense of, that's not comfortable for me, and then being able to feel comfortable asserting yourself in a way and saying, this wasn't comfortable for me, I didn't like that, please don't do that going ahead. Like, I would say from my experience of witnessing people with Saturn in Pisces, that the ability to feel that could not hurt the other person is more likely through the lens of Saturn in Pisces, because you're so empathetic, because you're so feeling that the way that you maybe perceive your own experience of what that could feel like for you can be then placed on the other person. And so that's what I mean about this experience of really, really feeling, and maybe struggling to feel that it's okay to be assertive in some sense, or to be able to establish a strong boundary, because you don't want the other person to feel Pisces doesn't want other people to feel bad, doesn't want people to feel sad about things, right? It's
No.
right. So that's where that exists. And but everything you mentioned about what you talked about there was just spot on, and I really liked how it's important to emphasize those points a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions we can go, because as we all know now, as we've moved through so many of the archetypes, there's so much to every archetype. But because of having this open energetic field, and again, Pisces is about the seamless, timeless, boundless. It's literally fluid, it's water. And when you put it into a Saturn container, it's it's a difficult combination in a sense, because they're so antithetical, as you mentioned. I can even say for
Exactly.
myself, like when someone I really care about is suffering on any level, I immediately feel it in my back, my low back. And that's Saturn, like that's the bones. It's like immediately it's almost like I can't even separate their pain from my body. It just goes there immediately. And so of course it's about, as we mature and as we um, get stronger in ourselves, we're able to hold space for others that are going through something. But it's something that just comes in like water. The emotion just comes in like water of others and just sits there, just parks itself there. And we'd have to see the whole chart to see, where does someone store that emotional energy. But this is just an example here. Another thing I wanted to add is that there are cases where the Saturn and Pisces archetype, or Saturn in the 12th, will have a tendency to sacrifice their own needs for the sake of another. So this is the classic, it can be the martyr, or, it can carry that masochistic kind of tendency, with the polarity being Virgo in this instance. And so, it can manifest in this way under this archetype. And again, this is not across the board, but it can happen. And it literally is linked with, putting the needs of another ahead of that soul. We see this a lot with the Virgo archetype, the Libra archetype, overgiving. Neptune, which rules Pisces, is the higher octave of Libra. And so it goes even further. You can think about in past lives, maybe this soul would have sacrificed their self for the cause, or for the church, or for, maybe they died for what they believed in, or really went all the way with something. So there's a sacrificial kind of energy on that level with the Saturn and Pisces. And also just getting so swept away by something, that becomes their whole reality, whatever it was that they were swept away by. And when it could be someone who's just massively in love with somebody, this dreamer type of soul, so in love that they don't know where that person stops and they start. Everything is completely, it's total immersion on that level. And then, I would say on the flip side, the shadow side could be the tendency to escape reality, whether it's through watching movies or drinking alcohol or drugs. I mean, it can manifest as well, or just not dealing with something, avoiding it altogether with just whatever it might be. Could also play out when reality becomes too much for that soul and they don't know how to hold it or contain it or manage it. So there can be a tendency to just escape, kind of check out. Again, this is like the shadow side of how that might manifest.
Yeah, completely. You're right, 100%. And to add to that, it's sacrifice. Oh my gosh. What about feeling, or what I've noticed is feeling struggle in direction? Where do I anchor my center and then say, this is the direction I want to go in? And feeling consistently able to hold that center. I've noticed in a few people that have got Saturn in Pisces that it's very difficult for them to sometimes feel like they're always going in a direction that means that is consistent for themselves. And I wonder if that has a lot to do with maybe the relationship to Pisces, as the reality is always maybe dissolving, or that things change, or that they're more inclined to see reality go through the flow essence, versus maybe being more fixated on a specific direction that needs to be upheld or committed to. Have you noticed that in the?
I also know some people with Saturn and Pisces that have been very focused and directed. So again, and have a lot of discipline. I'm thinking of some in particular right now that have a lot of Earth in their chart too. And so there's
Yes.
that, it really have to look at the whole. One way that can play out, it can either be a lack of direction, or it can be when you combine that Saturn, since it's a Capricorn element, right? Saturn rules Capricorn, and maybe that soul has some planets in Earth. I'm thinking of someone with a second house Pluto in Virgo, with Saturn and Pisces. And, it's been a very Taurian focused, deliberate life in that way, very structured, almost too structured. So you can see it go too far in that direction too. But absolutely, when you combine Saturn and Pisces with a lot of Earth, it can be a highly disciplined, focused soul as well. Pisces can be the archetype of no limits and going after the dream. It can be somebody who's just hitting it out of the park, in their reality, not limited by anything, not wanting to be limited by anything. And I would say too, that's why a lot of people with Saturn and Pisces, or Saturn in the 12th, are so drawn to spiritual pursuits, because there's no end to that pursuit, right? Maybe somebody that is, interested in a field that is unlimited in scope, like
Right.
space, outer space, or what have you. Saturn and Pisces souls don't want to be limited by anything. And I remember Jeff Green, I had this quote in my recent webinar. He said, creation is only limited by the imagination.
Yep, that's true.
Which is meaning, that's Pisces right there. That is a Pisces statement. So that's what a Saturn and Pisces soul would be saying, experiencing, feeling, and happy to be feeling that, in the dream state, there is no limit to where you can go, and it's free to dream. And so it feels better too for a lot of these souls, because the reality of life can be harsh, and Saturn and Pisces souls, people with a lot of Pisces, can be so sensitive that it's difficult to be here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, think about the people you've probably counseled, or in particular, I'm thinking of even a couple of teenagers that have a strong Pisces energy that have been very suicidal, that I've counseled. And it's just like, what's the point? Because they're feeling everything. And so when you help these souls to understand that so much of what they're carrying is not necessarily their own stuff, to get clear on what's theirs and what's not, and create more boundaries, more definition with it, it helps to manage some of what they are experiencing within themselves. So
It's
a big
true.
part of it.
And I mean, that was a really important point that you raised about Saturn Pisces souls having experiences of not only too much psychic impressions, but also carrying material that's potentially is not something that belongs to them, and maybe not even knowing that in that way. And have you also noticed in your experience with Saturn and Pisces souls I know Saturn and Virgo creates this dynamic, but Saturn and Pisces, feeling lost at sea, like trying to again navigate, like you said, some Saturn Pisces souls can be committed to that in that way, depending on where that placement is. Like you said, if there's a lot of Earth in the chart, that can counteract that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's the word lost is very common with souls that have a strong 12th house or Pisces influence, and the foggy feeling of not feeling grounded or directed. And it's definitely, remember, Saturn in Pisces, if it's in Pisces, we're in the 12th. Remember, we start with the house first. It's always the house first. So Saturn in the 12th, this would be true for Saturn in the 12th, whatever sign that soul has. It's influencing every other planet. So let's say that someone has Saturn in Pisces. That's going to condition their Venus. And let's say that when we think about Venus, we think about relationships, and maybe they're not sure how somebody else feels about them or where it's headed, or maybe Venus as it's linked with how they earn and what holds value on that level, and not sure of what to do for a living or how to direct their focus in that way. It can be a challenge in some cases, depending on how the chart's set up. We have Neptune in Pisces right now, transiting all of us. So wherever that's aspecting your chart, you might be feeling this. It's a little bit like trying to hold on to water as it's slipping through your fingers. We can't hold on to it. It's not something that it's not solidified. It's something so without boundary, right? And so it's hard to grab a hold of it sometimes, or feel like you've got a hold of your life or your journey when that Neptune is transiting your chart in some way, or you've come into this world with a strong influence on this level. But Saturn in Pisces, when it's well aspected, honestly, is just a phenomenal energy Again, like I mentioned earlier, when it's supported by Earth, it can allow dreams to come true. I think about people that are involved in even the movie business that are creating incredible films that have a message, right, for the world, or allow people to take a time out from life and enjoy a journey, a Pisces journey. And so a lot of people that are in the film industry, have strong 12th house energy, strong Pisces influence. So maybe a career in that realm, which is Saturn, right?
Exactly, exactly. And, that's another big thing there, dreaming. Saturn Pisces.
Right.
That Pisces element is the capacity to transcend the physical limitations of our sensory perception here, and to access the dream state, to access infinite possibility and potential, and what that means to bring into the physical. I don't know how to kind of end the sentence, but it's that state of using imagination, like you talked about with Jeffrey as well, and conjuring into this dream world itself something that we can digest, and we can use our senses to interact with. So films, for instance, are like brilliant examples of a Saturn in Pisces type of experience, because you think of the film Moana, for instance, and many other Disney films, but just one in particular, just because I've been recently working with it, in that this is a brilliant heroine's journey film, and it speaks to us on multiple levels. And this is kind of a Pisces essence here, is the different that when we're observing something or interacting with a film, for instance, that speaks to us in so many layers. It speaks to the impressions of when we've all felt fearful of something. We've all felt at some point this need to go on an adventure. We need to trust our intuition, as an example. All of these types of themes that are manifest in film, and the myth that is that can come with film, for instance. And we even think about Greek myth as an example. When we think about Chiron and his role, we incarnate the essence of these energies from the Piscean Neptunian realm, and we bring them into the physical. And these energies that we bring into the physical, these essences, through grounding it into Saturn, into the body, actually allows us to develop deeper spiritual insights into the nature of life itself, beyond just the rational, logical mind. And Saturn Pisces, in this sense, has this capacity to really see beyond just this most immediate space that we have right now, and to really be able to channel wisdom from that other side. And you can be representatives of people that really honor and truly embody a way of life that is rooted in compassion, rooted in empathy, sensitivity in that sense. But you first have to work through your shadow stuff.
I have to tell you a funny story. So when my son was in kindergarten,
Okay.
and we can throw up the chart. I wasn't going to say who it is, but let's throw it up. So we've got, Sun, Moon, and Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, which rules us, Saturn in the 12th, and Gemini.
Yeah.
North Node in the 12th. I mean, a lot of Pisces here. And so the ruler of that Saturn and Gemini in the 12th is in Pisces in the 9th house. So this is he's definitely been a spiritual teacher in other times. And here he is in kindergarten, and he goes to a birthday party. And I find out later from one of the parents that he's teaching the kids to meditate at the party. And he's teaching them about what the word Om means, O-M. I mean, I never even had a conversation with him about the word, the Om, what it meant, the sound of creation. And here he is, like 5 or 6 years old, at a birthday party. So, and the teacher actually, it was a class function, and the teacher was talking to me about it after the fact as well. So in terms of reaching into this other realm and being able to teach others about what this experience is and what it means, that far-reaching quality. It's like cross country lines, international lines, it's cosmic, it's universal. And the kids were just fascinated. It's just like the parents even more so. It was awesome. But on the other hand, he's not a kid anymore. He's going to be graduating from high school, and this same teacher had sent over a recommendation for an award he was getting. A bunch of his teachers were writing about just little old stories from the past, and one of his teachers said that as a class reward, they had gone to see the movie Up, UP, Up. I think it's Disney, right? And or Pixar or something. And the teacher hadn't been to the movie to preview it. And the conflict in the movie upset him so much. The teacher said that she still felt bad about it today. And the conflict in the movie, there's a lot of loss, the loss of the character's wife, potential loss of the home that he had spent so many years with her in, and then how he, ties the balloons to the home because they were going to do construction right in that area. So the home and the history of their past, so it could be taken up into the universe or wherever, somewhere else. So he didn't have to lose everything. He had already lost his wife in this movie. Well, my son was just devastated, after this film. I mean, and so young, like in tears. You see the sun, moon, balsamic, squaring the nodes. There's been a lot of loss. That Neptune, the ruler of the sun and moon, squaring Mars. This is a classic signature for a lot of trauma with the tribe, with the family of origin, a lot of sudden separation. I mean, home is everything. Family is everything. Tribe is everything to this soul. And so anyway, I just thought, gosh, I mean, we all know this for ourselves, that all the events that we've experienced in our life, we can look at our chart and find all the signatures to define them. Even this story I just shared, whether it was teaching the kids how to meditate and teaching them about the word Om, to just his own emotional sensitivity and devastation at the conflict in this movie Up. And Up, do you think about Up, you think about Pisces, right? You think about going up into the clouds. I mean, it's incredible, really.
Exactly.
I wanted to share one more too, because it was just perfect timing, really. But one of his teachers in high school was, let me see if I can find this here, was all these different teachers at different parts of his past were just asked to comment on him. And one of them was using the example of an astronaut. And when we think about, what do you think of when you think of astronaut? Do you think of Aquarius? Do you think of Pisces? What do you think of?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I definitely think of Pisces, just because of the nature of space and no gravity. I can completely see how there's an Aquarius element to it as well.
Yeah,
Maybe.
right. So you can see the Mars there,
Mhm.
and the Neptune and Pisces, and Neptune and Aquarius, which rules all the Pisces.
Yeah.
So this is and how another teacher is describing him. He says, so you're sending a mission to Mars. It's the first mission, and it has to be successful. So you put the names of all the astronauts in a hat. You set your criteria. First, smart as a whip. You pull out of the hat all the names of astronauts who don't meet the standard. Then you follow the same procedure for the following criteria. Physically and mentally fit, check. Extraordinary self-discipline, check. Problem solver, check. Gets along well with others, check. Sticks to it, check. And has a kindness streak, check. You look at the hat, there's only one name left. You turn it over, and it's his. And so this is how one of his teachers was describing him. And you think about a lot of those elements were very Capricorn, right? responsible, discipline, etc., which is that Saturn is in the 12th. I mean, when you do combine Saturn with Pisces, it's going to carry that quality if it's got other Earth in the chart, right? So you see the sun and the moon in the 10th there, and obviously that Mars in Taurus too probably helps out some. But it's the kindness streak, and there was all of these notes, beautiful notes from teachers, and there was one similarity in all of these notes, which had to do with sensitivity, compassion for others, and the kindness, this kindness, like treat the classic, do unto others as you would like to have, what's the quote? Do unto others as you would like to have done to yourself. Exactly. It's like a classic, just a natural teaching from the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that is the common thread from all of these different teachers. And I love how the movie Up, and then this astronaut theme, I mean, it's all just part of this soul's journey, and it's reflected so much in the chart. And I would say one thing, just to add a note on this, I mean, he's a soul that, like, if he's in trouble, it's probably like the worst thing in the world to either be in trouble with his parents, a teacher, or, you know, he was describing the other day that he was driving down to a friend's house, and he started hearing sirens and these red flashes behind him. And I mean, we all feel that way if we think we're being pulled over, but he was literally describing it like his heart was on the hood of the car, you know, like he just couldn't he was about ready to have a heart attack, you know. This fear of being in trouble is, you know, that sensitivity. And then it quickly goes through, I wonder if everyone's okay. And then who just got busted, or, you know, instantly going to the other person, and this fear of what might be happening. So there's that sensitivity for others, but also like, this fear of getting in trouble, which, you know, you can see that Neptune squaring the Mars, right? Mm-hmm. Ruler of the Venus and Aries in the 10th. I mean, you can tell that there's been consequences for not being, well, this is, you know, it's kind of like very much part of underdog tribes as well, you know, kind of this dominant force taking over the smaller guy in this case, right?
And also how, to me, this chart also speaks to somebody that is trying to resolve the repression of their voice around natural law. And that's why I think when you talked about the Om, this was this kind of, to me, I see a soul that with the South Node balsamic, or it's actually about to make a conjunction to Pluto. And that's what I was saying earlier, in that I would notice that souls that have got Saturn in Pisces, the 12th house, will come into this lifetime with a kind of resolving dynamic. And then you've got that Mars, that Sun Moon balsamic phase in a completion, like needing to be completed on the nodal axis. And then you've got South Node and Pluto just about to make contact to each other. You know, that the soul's obviously clearing up something here. And I think that it's about really finding the value in their individuality and in their voice, and to, you know, emotionally Cancerizing self-identify first house with their truth, as if that is that's their truth in itself, even though it could be perceived as bizarre, like the kids going, or maybe the society going, why would you be teaching the value of Om in a kids class like that? Like, who's Abraham Lincoln? You know, like that's real truth. And he's like, no, not really, but it can be translated. That's how I see that Saturn in the 12th house. So you really need somebody that has a unique vision to be able to access this person's truth. And to be quite honest, what better person to have as a mother than you, in this sense, because you would really be able to, you might even not even do that directly. You could just represent yourself as somebody that is really speaking their truth in the face of a world that may have looked at it and said, this is odd. What is astrology really valuable at? You know, or what is spirituality really valuable at? Yeah.
Well,
so
it's like, you know, what it is really is that, you know, there's nothing more important than being natural, right? And being honest, because, you know, we live that way in this home, right? We live in a way that we don't have to apologize for who we are, right? We're trying to promote being who you are, as you are, and the power of what that is, and how you can influence others to do the same just by being who you are. And honestly, I mean, this is a highly emotional soul, incredibly emotional. I mean, Cancer rising even, right? And so as a boy becoming a man, it's, and to be open with your emotional body. It's, for a long, long time, it hasn't been an accepted norm. But this teaching around ultimate strength lies in the vulnerability has been so strong throughout his life that he's learned to lean on that truth, to support others, to reach others, and to feel stable in his own inner self, or in those own emotional waters, to not repress what he's feeling, but to express what he's feeling. And so, yeah, this has been a skip step, and now I would say, he's um, I would say he's careful who he expresses how he feels to, because that's where the boundary piece, right? You don't need to tell everyone how you're feeling all the time, but he's not afraid to say what he's feeling if he's asked. And I think that, for all of us, I mean, being able to express ourselves without fear is a big part of this journey,
Exactly.
and not
Exactly.
apologize for how we're feeling about whatever it is.
Hmm. That's exactly it. That's like the resolution of those things completely.
So do you have another chart? Do you want to sneak up real quick?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure how much time we've got, but I mean, there's not really much to say, to be honest. In this one, there's just another example of Saturn. Let me just get the drawing machine up over here. Saturn in Pisces in the first house, though, and the rising signs in Saturn. So, and then
From Pisces, yeah.
right, and then you can see this interesting Neptune Uranus conjunction square the nodes. And this,
Wow. And then, yeah, Saturn's retrograde too.
uh-huh, that's right. And it is Saturn also squares this Mars Venus in balsamic phase as well. And then you've got the 29-degree Pluto that's sitting at the top
Wow.
there. So it's
So
just
what does this
fascinating.
soul do? I don't know how old this person is, but what do they do for a living?
Interestingly, so this is the group of souls that were born 1995, when you mentioned Saturn in Pisces there. And they are actually currently investing their time and energy into studying clinical psychology.
Oh, right. That's
Yeah.
great. And probably got to be on alternative kind of astrology, right?
Yes. So
I
they're
mean, psychology.
yeah, absolutely. Jung's work,
Mhm.
so there's a lot of that, and they're currently actually at the moment. I think when Uranus was conjunct their south node, they actually, and then I think the sun was over here. They actually became a mother. So
Oh,
interestingly enough, they also had to surrender a lot of their life direction
wow.
for this new role that was taken on board. And I'm curious if there was a kind of meaning in that, to kind of really rediscover whatever was needed to be lost, well, that was lost here, before they could actually take their career going forward with something that had a deeper meaning to it. It's definitely something that
Wow.
I've observed in that process. So there's something really interesting about going in a specific direction, but then having an experience when there were transits hitting those specific points that indicated trying to recover something in order to move forward.
Well, definitely. I mean, you've got the moon opposition, the Mars, Venus in the 10th.
Mm-hmm.
And being just the need to balance both worlds, right? Mother and career.
Yes, exactly, and that is like a huge theme in this person's soul story that exists beyond just their life, but actually something that their own mother had to do as well. So
Well, think
it's
about it. I mean, that Saturn transit currently going over the Uranus and was going over the Neptune, squaring the nodes.
mm,
I mean, you're a mother for life, right? So all the time that it takes in the child's early years, and then again having to balance both worlds, it's not going away anytime soon. It's going to be a big year for this soul. but that Saturn transit sextiling the Pluto at the same time. So, you know, there's a way to manage it. There's a way to honor the work that the soul needs to do while still being a mother. And I can imagine that being a mother is going to help cultivate a greater depth, emotional presence for the clients. You know, as a mother, they're going to be going through, she's going to be going through so much ultimately in her own life that she'll be able to bring to the client. So, you know, I definitely feel too that mothers that are having to juggle both work and being a parent, and just it's really important for a lot of women to feel empowered in the world beyond, not that being a mother isn't the most important job, it is, but there's also this need to integrate both sides of who they are, and to feel self-reliant in this case is part of this soul's journey, financially and emotionally. So it's critical that she's able to do both and to learn how to balance them both.
That's right.
But
And just
for
to
professional,
add to what you said there as well, one of the things that's interesting is that when you kind of work in that type of work, when you have that mother experience in life, there's an extra dimension to how you actually relate to human beings in experiences where you might not necessarily deal with when you're not a mother. You know, that's that process. So, yeah, definitely interesting.
all right. Well, so this was a great show on Pisces, the sensitivity of Pisces, the power of Pisces, and how Saturn and Pisces souls can really, well, they can really be instrumental in healing this planet as well, whether it's through psychology or film or any kind of outreach on that level, because of that, the energy of being able to kind of transcend space and time, whether they want to or not. It's just that open auric field. And so I remember hearing a quote from somebody about this Pisces energy is too sensitive for this soil. It's never left me. I thought that was such an incredible way to describe this archetype in a Saturn and Pisces context. But there is a way to weave in the wonders of this world with a consciousness that can be grounded and here doing what the soul came here to do, like bringing all that they are to this world and making it better. It's such a powerful place for Saturn if the soul can tap into sort of that eternal space within themselves and be able to kind of hold the space for others, or be able to hold that container that is so vast within them, and help others with who they are. I feel like it's just a really powerful place for that Saturn. So any last thoughts before we bid adieu?
To culminate our entire series, Saturn in Pisces, just make sure that you keep your reality and your state of awareness clean as much as you can, in terms of, you know, honoring that you're a very sensitive person, that you're very prone to, you know, drawing in people that might have very weak boundaries in your life, and this can kind of materialize as toxic relationships, that you need to have strong psychic boundaries. Being able to dream is something that's really big for you. Don't let people discourage you when they tell you that you're sometimes a little bit spacey, or that you are, you know, a dreamer in that way. This is your quality. This is a gift.
That's so true.
Right. And to honor your spirituality, and to, in a very serious Saturn kind of way, make sure that you at least try as much as possible to remain sober as much as you can. You know, I'm saying, like, go and enjoy having some fun, but just know that you're probably more prone to enjoying addictive type of experiences, because, you know, as I said, there's the things can be like chocolates, for instance. You might just have a really, really strong addiction to sweets in that sense, you know, whatever it is. But yeah, I would say that. Okay.
All right. Yeah, don't be afraid to dream. That's for sure.
100%.
I like that. All
So
right. Well, thank you so much for this entire series. If you're listening to this and you missed, I don't know, Saturn in Cancer, Saturn in Taurus, we have them all up on EA Zoom. Find your Saturn placement by house and sign. You're going to want to listen to them both. You may not have Saturn in, if you have Saturn in Cancer, it might not be in the 4th house, right? It might be in the 6th house. So you want to listen to the Virgo series, or the Virgo episode, I should say. And yeah, it's all up on EA Zoom if you want to listen and learn more about Saturn. So thank you so much, Simon. We'll be back with something else soon, and in the future at some point we need to discuss that. But until then, namaste.